Hey, Carter.
We have a quorum. Carter, did you hear me? We have a quorum.
I did hear you. I'm going to wait just a second because it looks like we still have a few other people.
Sure.
That's good background, Dana.
I mean, this is my go-to, Rich. It's my go-to. Thanks.
All right, though. That's good. Although I'm afraid you're going to get hit by a car.
Well, that's the advantage of, not a lot of traffic in New York.
Good call.
The traffic is back.
Dan can hang out in the middle of Times Square.
We're looking down West Broadway here.
Okay.
Bob, is there an agenda? I have a calendar. Am I supposed to have an agenda as well?
We don't, because we usually do the agendas. I just say what it's going to be. So
Okay, I'll pay attention.
which I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Sorry, I think most people are here. We're up to at least pages, so that's good. Okay, so the agenda is I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's our executive committee meeting on June 16th. Today's the 16th, right? June 16th, 2020. I was going to propose the following agenda, which is the district manager's report, the chair's report, reviewing the calendar, going through the committee reports, and then new business and old business. Does that sound good to everybody? All right. Did I get a second? Is that Joe's thumbs up a second? I will verbally call that as a second. All right. So let's get started. Bob?
There's just one thing I wanted to touch on during my report, which is over the past couple of weeks, I've been getting a lot of two different kinds of phone calls or emails coming into the office. And there are restaurants, for the most part, restaurants and bars who have been closed and are calling to find out when they can put tables and chairs out on the sidewalk, what the process is for outdoor dining, can they get a permit? And my answer, unfortunately, is that as of now, there's no legal way for them to put tables and chairs on the sidewalk. And yet at the same time, these restaurants who are adhering to the rules can see a lot of their competitors starting to put tables and chairs out to varying degrees. And that's the second type of phone call I've been getting. A lot of complaints and emails with photos attached complaining about restaurants that are violating the law and the no social distancing, no wearing of masks, people with open containers of alcohol in the streets. Carter knows this better than anyone because he's been riding around the neighborhood quite a bit. Sunday, I was walking around Soho and the South Village and part of the Greenwich Village, and one that I missed, but I'll start with this one because a photo was sent to me this morning. Lola Taverna on Prince Street, right at the corner of McDougal and 6th Avenue. We've had complaints about them for the past several weeks. They were putting chairs out in front of the restaurant on the area where their sidewalk cafe would have been, actually expanding that footprint. But what they've been doing recently, because I think they were told by the precinct they can't do that, they've moved the inside of their restaurant into Father Fagan Park. They've taken over the north side of Father Fagan Park with, I don't know how many tables and chairs were there, but it's outrageous. So I've been in touch with the precinct just today and with a couple of city agencies about that. But beyond them, I'll just rattle off some names: Cipriani, Sola, Latteray, Bistro Le Ami, Songi Napoli, Pesce Pasta on Bleecker Street, Suprema on 7th Avenue South. All of them, this is a small number of the restaurants that I saw and we've getting complaints about. When I was walking around on Sunday, this is later in the afternoon when I got to 7th Avenue South, it was around 5 o'clock. The Stonewall National Monument, the Christopher Street Park, had been taken over. There was a performer in the middle of it, but there must have been 200 guys out there, most without masks, many with open containers. There was a line around the corner from the Monster, waiting to get drinks. I don't know what other bars were serving drinks, but it was really, as far as social distancing and being aware of the COVID-19, it was out of control. So we've been struggling on how to deal with this because on the one hand, nobody wants to hurt businesses that are maybe at risk of surviving, and yet at the same time, they're flouting the rules that are in place to kind of protect people. So anyway, I'm just kind of tossing it out there. I've been talking, Carter and I talk about this almost every day now, and coming in our office right now. That's all I've got to talk about.
Are we logging those in any way?
Yes.
In a spreadsheet or anything?
I've got a list, but it's not on a formal spreadsheet, but I can put it on a spreadsheet.
Okay.
Carter, you're on mute.
Pat Comerford is going to be calling you first thing in the morning about that. I forgot to tell you when I just talked to you a minute ago. There, obviously, everybody knows. I mean, from the precincts to the elected officials, there's a lot of obviously issues if you've been around with the outdoor eating and dining. One of the I spoke to the Speaker's office with Patrice Comerford, and they are in the process right now of the intro. Is it 1957? I think I got that right. And DOT, they're two separate programs. So I think DOT is going to announce something apparently at the end of this week, but it wasn't clear if there's an overlay to the intro or how that's going to work out. But there clearly is going to be some movement. So nobody knows what the announcements will be, but that should be happening towards the end of this week. I think it's another weekend like this past weekend. I'm just going to shut my phone off because everybody calling me and texting me pictures was a little bit intense. Just this is how widespread it is. And clearly the social distancing is really one of the main issues. And the other issue is sort of free passage on the sidewalks. And so between those two issues, I think that those are, very serious. And the passage on the sidewalks has really made people very uncomfortable moving around in some areas. And, it's clearly an issue. And as far as, so we had discussed last week at last week's executive, I'm going to be creating an equity working group. Mar Fitzgerald and Patricia Larry are going to be chairing the committee. We're still working out the details of the membership. They've already started working. We talked for a couple hours right after our last executive meeting and sort of laid out the work that they've been doing this week and outreach to board members. The idea is, we'll talk about this more extensively in new business. The idea is that the letter which was circulated to you is something that we're hoping can be presented after you guys have had an opportunity to comment tonight to the full board on Thursday. And we're going to ask board members if individually if they would like to sign on to the letter. So it's not going to be in the form of a resolution. It's going to be a letter from the board members sent to our community. So we can discuss that further. There's also the board chairs collectively in Manhattan have been discussing putting together our own group of just the boards. It's sort of very much early on in what that might be, but the idea from my understanding at this point is that collectively the boards could ask for engagement with our elected officials sort of collectively for the borough, which would be much more impactful as far as having them listen to us. Most of, I think, the board members don't think of ourselves this way, but we are an institution. And so one of the goals for the equity working group is addressing our own institution and what we can do. It's a sphere that we control. There are things that we can do much better. Things that we can ensure are part of the conversation every time by looking at our policies and procedures on how we deal with things, and whether that be asking better questions in questionnaires, allowing people to self-identify who they are. There's many different ways that we can approach that. So that's one of the areas that I've sort of tasked Mara and Patricia with looking at and figuring out a way to do that, in addition to other areas that the working group can really look to in our sphere of influence. Our sphere of influence is most people know, we're advisory. And so, and we're really focused on our own community. And so there's a lot of global issues clearly that are raised, and we hear everybody talking about. What we really want to look at with our working group is our local community, our board, and what we can do better. And then I think that the opportunity of working with the other boards might become the vehicle of looking at some of the larger issues as far as they relate to the city and other areas. As at this point, we're still working on how everything is going to work out. And I've been talking to Mara and Patricia just about every other day on this. And so I know they've reached out to people. So I think we're in a very good starting point right now as far as moving this forward. And another issue which I wanted to talk about is the full board meeting. We still are not doing so well with time management. And I'm just wondering if I can get a sense from people about limiting questions to the elected officials, and if we want to maybe have board members submit written questions in advance, or do we just want to have a set time for questions after each elected official? One of the things is that I'm going to ask Susan with the timer to allow the alarm to keep going off at the end of the time, so that the automatic muting on Zoom turns off, so everybody can hear it clearly. But it's really a challenge, and I know people want to hear from our electeds, and people do want to ask them questions, but at the same time, the meetings are dragging. And but if we have to sit on our meetings for over 2 hours before we get to our business session, it really dilutes the quality of our own discussion on the matters that we're providing our advisory opinions on.
I have a quick question about that. Is it possible to know which of the electeds are actually going to appear beforehand? Because it's a very different thing if Pat appears versus Corey.
Absolutely. I mean, we generally find out, the day of or the day before. We don't.
Is it possible for the board to know about that as well? Because that might help people formulate their thoughts.
I don't disagree. We just aren't informed that far in advance usually. And as you all know, jumping in with Zoom is not complicated if they choose to visit us. So, we can have 5 electeds who want to speak, and we've been giving them 5 minutes, and then, you know, if you've got 10 minutes of questions and suddenly, you know, we've taken up quite a bit of time. So Susanna, you just said something. Chenault, did you want to?
I would suggest that time is better than advance because the questions generally grow out of the report.
Right. So
There are occasions that one might have one in reserve.
So how do you think that we should address that?
A limited amount of time for questions.
Okay.
And then a good rein on how long, and that everyone should just self-edit about how long the question is. And the usual thing of questions rather than extensive statements.
It hasn't worked yet. I mean, that's I mean, that's why I'm just bringing it up again, because I think we collectively, you know, there's a lot of value in having our electeds come to speak in front of us. And, you know, we're very fortunate when we have that engagement. You know, the idea is using it productively. And so that's just, there's a balancing act. And that's why I'm putting it before you guys to you know, I hear people don't want to spend 4 hours on a meeting. I get it. At the same time, you know, sometimes when our elected speaks, it's one of the most interesting parts of the meeting when something is actually happening that people are interested in. We instituted last month is having them put a link to their reports in the chat. And I think that was successful for anybody who wanted more information. It also allowed them to be heard so that they didn't have to, you know, recount everything that's in the report, which I think in some cases saves some time. And I think for their reps, it helps a lot. Coral?
So I have two suggestions. One, is it possible for us to separate the update from our local officials to the board as an entirely separate meeting that maybe the community members are interested in participating in, actually separate from the board meeting? And kind of like what we're doing with the health and hospitals. So that's the first question, because then it separates it entirely and it breaks up sort of, it just breaks it up. And if we can't do that, my suggestion would be having all the electeds or their offices tape or provide links by noon of that day. And then we can review it and submit questions. And then hopefully a lot of us have similar questions and you can aggregate that and say the questions we got were, and then if anything really wasn't covered, a board member could raise their hand. But it at least, you know, kind of puts the onus on all of us and them to do the work ahead of time and think about it ahead of time. And then we submit by 3 or whatever, and then the office can, or you can aggregate the questions and it's just asked once instead of being asked 5 different ways.
So that's more opportunities to ask questions. So I think we have to pick one or the other. And I like the idea, Bob, we should reach out and get those reports out by noon. You know, maybe you can send out an email to everybody and let's get those links out, because that's a very good point. You know, people who do want to review them. And as far as the questions, if we're going to ask for questions early, I don't think we can take questions, right?
That's fine. I think that's fine. I mean, you either do the work and submit your question, or you aren't just like in the moment thinking of, you know, whatever. You actually thought, is this a valid question to take up time on? Or I can just email the office separately than the meeting.
Right. Okay. Frederica?
My suggestion is to limit the representatives of electeds to a written statement and limit the actual time for the actual elected to 3 minutes. But I like Coral's idea of asking people to submit their quotes testimony early in the day, and if we have any from the representatives of the electeds, and if we have any questions we can ask. But I agree with you, Carter. The meetings are brutal.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to not allow an elected official's representative to address our body. It just, that doesn't strike me as, number one, a good thing, and it may encourage more of the elected reps to come, which I think we can.
But why can't they have newsletters? They have statements. Everything they say is, you know, a part of their.
Right, that's what Bob's going to get earlier in the day and try and get out. But I'm just hesitant to limit our elected officials from having an opportunity sort of in the moment to address.
Well, maybe I wasn't clear. I was saying the representative of the elected.
Right. Well, they come in the stead of the elected, right? They are
Right.
the elected when they come.
Right, but
I hear what you're
then-
saying. We have a long running tradition. It sort of drifts over to what Coral was saying, is if we go to a separate meeting, but I don't know if we need another meeting. Some boards have.
You can't have your cake and eat it too, so.
It's one thing when they answer questions, but it's not a lot of fun when they grandstand about every wonderful thing that they feel that they have done. And so maybe a very short statement and then opening it for questions would allow more of what we're interested in.
Yeah. Okay. Janet?
So I don't know. I mean, if 5 minutes or 3 minutes is interesting, but we've never insisted, like the electeds do not think the rules apply to them, the senior elected. So we're going to have to be humorous and kind, but really clear. Like, are we really going to leave the buzzer buzzing as, you know, Deborah Glick is talking? Like that's, you know, that's the, and maybe that's somewhat rhetorical, but you know, that is a question.
That's what I'm asking. You know, and as the executive committee, if you guys think that that's what we should be doing, then, you know, I see Keen is waving at me as opposed to raising her hand, but all emphatically. So you want to address it? Keen, you have to unmute yourself.
Part of our power, besides advisory, I believe, is that the electeds come and talk to us and we talk to them. So I am hesitant to shrink the meeting in a way that diminishes our power, because they can actually do stuff. That's what so I worry about, you know, it's not convenient for us to listen, but it is very convenient for them to think they have to listen to us.
Yeah, and you know,
I agree with restricting the time for everybody, but be careful.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, because the events of since our last full board meeting have been pretty extraordinary, you know, and I keep using that word over and over again, but it seems to keep applying every, you know, passing few weeks. And maybe if our electeds do address the issues that are relevant in front of us today, that's something that the board may want to hear. So I just, you know, that's a good point, Keen. I mean, that you're raising, that our questions can make a big difference, because they direct to what our interests are, right? With our specific electeds. Valerie?
Hey, so I kind of had this idea before I heard some of the others, but I think it should just be really simple. 5 minutes for them to speak, 5 questions, that's it. And I think that we should put the onus back on ourselves to make sure that we are respectful of the power that Keen talked about, and that we try to ask a question, to really limit it to, if you're a board member, you ask one question, that's it for the entire elected portion, so that it's a deliberate question and that it's not the same people asking their specific question that's so niche that it really doesn't the broad information doesn't apply to everyone, that it's actually something that could be handled by emailing the rep directly. So I think it's on us too to not make it a diary confessional session. That's it.
I see Sandy has her hand up. I'm sort of going back and forth here. Sandy?
I just think if it's 5 minutes, how many of those office representatives are there? I mean, if there are 10 speakers, that's an hour.
Yeah, no, so the reps get 2 minutes.
Oh, okay.
And then, you know, we give the deference to the actual elected officials.
Got it. Okay, I'm sorry.
But you raise a good point. I mean, you know, and that it all adds up. The time all adds up. And Amy?
Hi, so I'm going to suggest something that, or to change something that I'm accused of myself, I know I've done it, is that we use chat really effectively. So if a board member has a question, it goes into chat. And that will keep down the a lot of questions get very long with the thank you for all you've done. Da, 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 da. Yeah, we're thankful for that. But maybe if you just type it in the chat and then it's read out, if board members are okay with that, that would keep the length of the questions down and they would just be pithier if we do it through chat. And then we all use the raising the hands. And I know I've jumped in out of my turn sometimes, but that would keep things in more orderly fashion. And I think that might keep things tighter. And I agree with the 5 minutes. I would have it ding, 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 and they'll probably say, what's that? And you can turn it off. And as Janet says, you just say humorously, well, got this new thing going on or something until they catch on.
Yeah, the chat sort of brings up another thing. I'm a little hesitant to use the chat too much because it's not public and it's not the way we normally conduct our meetings. But if people put forward in the chat to all panelists in the public, people just aren't aware of it. It's sort of like when the public is sending something to us during the meeting that's not appropriate during our business session. Because it's not something we would ever allow during the meeting. But that's an interesting idea, Amy, of like, how do we, using the chat?
Well, if you read out the question.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's right. It's
right, you'd be reading out the question, then it's not confidential, it's public.
And then I think the other thing, which I had forgotten, is that people can only go once, with each person. You get your question and that's it. And it's like one question and, not follow-ups and okay. And then Susan?
Two things. First, I think it's really valuable if our electeds if we reach out to them in advance so that their statements are prepared and they're already like crafting them to be within a time period. To have someone just get on and then start talking and then hear a beep they may just ignore it because there are so many extraneous sounds. But if they know that we're really doing this and they prepared themselves to do it, they can be more effective and we can be more effective. The second thing is anyone who says, I will be brief or one quick question should be prohibited from asking any questions. Okay? It like makes me nuts. Sorry, guys.
Michael?
Hi, yes, I want to reiterate the importance of allowing, and not putting in chat, but putting it verbally, of allowing one question per board member. Someone said this before, and I am reinforcing that frequently a question will come up that we didn't think of in advance, but based upon what the elected official has said, it raises a question in our mind. So I think we should always allow them to speak, and I don't know about putting questions in chat. I agree, Carter. It's too difficult to follow all the questions in chat, but when a board member asks a question based upon something that an elected official or a representative has said, we should allow only one question and not allow cross discussion. Sometimes we get involved in cross discussion back and forth, and that is very time consuming. So I would say let's limit the elected officials to 5 minutes, the representatives to 2 minutes, and one question only with no back and forth with any of the board members who choose to ask a question live and in person, not in the chat.
Yeah, Amy had just, speaking of chat, Amy had brought something. This is something all boards are struggling with. This is not, a situation that's unique to us. I'm thinking maybe what we do is, so we do 2 minutes for the reps. I don't think it's very, when we asking the reps questions, they usually have to get back to us. So I think that maybe if the reps come, if people have questions, they can email the reps directly, or they can have Bob email them. So we can just keep that at 2 minutes. If we have the electeds, maybe we have them speak for 5 minutes, limit the question answer time to 5 minutes, and then one question per person. And, if it goes over that time period, I can say that everybody has asked me to ask them politely, that we've got a long meeting ahead of us to just, if that becomes necessary. There might be a few extra minutes there, but Keen raises a really good point, and so does that seem agreeable, or is that, and then Bob's going to try and send out things in advance at noon. And if people want to send email in a question, you can email Bob and I can just propose those at the beginning.
Yeah, I just have one more thing to add, which is I think the public should have a reasonable expectation of knowing when the actual meeting starts. And so when we have things on the agenda and someone's dialing into our board meeting because they're interested in a particular item of a committee that's like way down the line, to suddenly be, having a 6:30 meeting and their subject item doesn't come up till like 9, just doesn't seem like we're doing a very good service to the public. So I do think we need to do, it's sort of an iteration, but they should have a reasonable expectation of when the actual board meeting starts.
Well, it starts at 6:30.
But there's like, if you look at the agenda is very impossible to time. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's an unfair thing to the public that if they come, they think they have one thing they want to pay attention to that's like on one committee, and then suddenly there's like an hour and a half because of the update.
Right. Well, that's in some respects, that's why I'm bringing it up.
And then just the last thing is obviously we want the public officials to come. So if they're limiting them to 5 minutes, they're going to feel like we don't really want them to come or whatever. Of course, it is absolutely important that they show up in person.
And another thing that boards have done, and I don't think we can do it this month, but maybe in the future, is having the elected official reports at the end of the meeting. And that allows the energy of the board to really be focused on our own business. And so I'm just put that out there. If people think about that during this month's full board, if that would be helpful. And that maybe we can set a time later, but again, times are not always, you guys have all seen different parts of our meetings move at different speeds, and sometimes we can catch up that the overall meeting ends at a certain time, but sometimes we get bogged down in things. So, all right. So I think you got a pretty good sense of that. And so now we're going to move on to the calendar. People have had a chance to review the committee chairs. Let's see if I have the calendar in front of me.
Carter?
Yep.
As you know, the Euler calendar is still suspended, and I see that you have a land use meeting scheduled, but we don't have anything at present.
Yeah, Bob had put that together. I mean, so here's and this is what I've just been saying to all the committee chairs, right? If phase 2 is announced, it may bring the changes of the committees and what moves forward. Do you think, Frederica, we should keep it on there?
I defer to you and Bob. I suppose we can always take it off, but I'm just saying that we have not had any communications whatsoever. So.
Right. Okay. All right. Yeah, Bob, do you want to reach out, or Frederica, and just see what they say about that? Because I'm just concerned that we're going to have sort of a little, open the floodgates when we might have a number of matters before us. Because what we had 3 pending or 2 pending.
We have a 4 or 5.
Okay,
in
4
the
or
can,
5,
so to speak. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm just, it's just if they open.
Sure, we can just touch base and reconfirm in the next week. Mm-hmm.
And then, Rich, everything's good with you for parks?
Yeah, I think that's fine. First seems okay. And
then the first meeting of the equity working group is going to be on June 30th. So that's the day before the beginning of July, obviously. But I'm just so everybody knows. Bob and Donna, I mean, we may or may not need 2 meetings right at this point, but we don't have the cutoff date. Is not.
You want to go, Donna?
There's not much for next month, but I think it's good to keep the second.
Okay, keeping it tentative.
Get it on there, yeah.
We can make the decision next week when we have to. Okay, and then and so Janine, for you guys, 13th works.
Yes, for the 13th, that's the date we gave to Trinity Real Estate and their consultants. I'm still waiting for them to confirm.
Okay, and then Janet, is the 14th work for you?
Yes, that's fine, thanks.
Okay, and Chenault, the 16th is?
we're the most stable, fixed, and always have something that we don't yet, oddly enough.
Okay, so with that in mind, sort of we have some of the calendar that was circulated the week of the 12th. We're just going to pencil in exact on that Wednesday in case we have anything that comes up. We still have an opportunity because obviously we have some tentative meetings here that we could move things around. So in the next couple of days, if something comes up, Joe's committee, you know, obviously if we get anything in, we'll have to figure that out. Robin, for Arts and Institution, did you guys?
You know, I don't know if you remember, I replied to Kristen, is it Kristen Jones?
Right.
And I never heard back. I don't know if you did.
No, but I don't know if that's really a subject of a meeting yet.
No, I'm just saying,
yeah.
I would have invited her in July, except I have not heard back.
Got it.
Okay. What she's looking for.
And then, so we're probably also going to be working with Mara and Patricia to have another date for the equity working group. We haven't set that for July. And then Valerie for the reopening working group. That's still, so we have a number of days that are open for both of those groups if we want to schedule some meetings. So we'll get to that. Okay, so I think we're in good shape there. So we're going to go moving on. We're going to start with the economic development. Janet.
So we had a nice, you know, I don't know if you're all there, we had a nice cross section of retailers. And, you know, I'll be writing notes up on it. But basically there's unanimous feeling about needing open streets to get things going, even the dry goods people. So if you have people out and activity, the streets feel safe and then they come to their stores. So that was, you know, as far as actionable items. So, you know, that was something that was discussed. Obviously onboarding of stores is a big deal, and we're talking amongst ourselves if we can do anything with the insurance companies. Few people are concerned about parking. I don't know about parking regulations around stores, but if there's 2 hours, maybe they say it should be 30 minutes. And talked about another thing we could take some action on is marketing, because if the businesses are not part of a business improvement district, there's no sort of unified messaging going on about letting the public know that they're open and their value to our neighborhood. So we're going to discuss that with small business services. And then for the next meeting that we will make an attempt to actually, because we heard from the retailer side and obviously rent's a big deal, to see if we can get some landlords to come in and discuss sort of from their perspective, you know, what's happening, you know, and maybe ideas that they have. So that's kind of the plan for next month, if we can find some communicative landlords. Dan, I don't know if Bo's on the call, but that's sort of the nutshell of the meeting.
No.
Dan, did that pretty much cover it?
Yeah, there were basically 4 points. I think, I'm not quite sure everybody is, small retailers are sold on the open streets. Definitely the sidewalk space to a degree, but, you know, like someone like Jill was undecided about it, but I think she'd consider it if there was that 30-minute parking. To her, that temporary parking was crucial.
And just you know, one of the things there was a little confusion on during the meeting is that there's no commercial activity allowed on open streets. And New York really highly regulates commercial activity outside. And we've already seen this problem with bars and restaurants, you know, using spaces. And I think that that's something that needs clear guidance if that's going to be something that the city puts forward, because it's very confusing. I mean, there's already soup line licenses already exist, you know, that exist, that there's a framework for, but just setting up tables outside, you know, further blocks some of our narrow sidewalks. And it's something we really need to if we want that to be a part of a discussion, we need to follow up with our electeds to really and get some sort of framework put in place for that.
You know, I agree, because I mean, there's a need for it, and as long as it's not addressed, it's sort of happening willy-nilly. But as you know, for John Hardy was saying, well, Soho feels unsafe. Why does Soho feel unsafe? It's because it's desolate. So just getting people to come out, and if there's orderly sort of eating and drinking, those people then eat and then they go shop.
Yeah.
So I kind of, you know, agreed that I just think there's an urgency around that issue, and how it plays out. Obviously, we all don't know yet.
I think just in the case of many of these issues, that once phase 2 comes to us, I think that there'll be some more clarity, because we may see more activity as far as which stores are going to open, which aren't. There's a lot of open questions right now. And I think a lot of, you know, we heard last night, a lot of businesses are not interested in opening if they can only do curbside pickup, because it just doesn't fit the models of most of our local businesses. So I think maybe, Janet, we should just sort of see what happens if it's whenever phase 2 is, and just go from there. I think it's going to be a very big change on that day, and a little bit more clarity, and maybe we come back. And SBS, I would like to do a call with SBS, with you, Janet, and really push this idea of some sort of neighborhood, you know, focused way people can see what businesses are open or what aren't. That idea is something that SBS should really be. It's not complicated, put it that way, right? I mean,
one of the things that was mentioned was that the bids only cover a very small portion of our community board. There is a concern that the SBS is overloaded. They don't have the manpower to help out as we'd like them to, as I think Carter is intimating there. And that, is it possible to have more representation for business interests? And SBS not necessarily being the answer.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying that SBS can create a framework of some program that neighborhoods all across the city could participate in, is what I mean, just that helps take that stepping stone, you know, that first step to give them the tools that different neighborhoods, including our neighborhoods, could, you know, we've seen that in just trying to collect lists of open businesses, right? They did it on a citywide basis, and you identify your local neighborhood, they can get the word out. We don't have.
Yeah, they may be more amenable to be more proactive, because they're certainly needed right now.
Yeah.
And for those of you who weren't there, it was interesting, because although there was bad news, I was surprised that, you know, we had Jonathan Adler and John Hardy, 10,000 Things, Boz Bagels, and Scott from the entertainment group, and several of them are like, I thought everybody was just going to be sort of almost done, but they're surviving. Not the food people.
I don't know, Janet. I got a different perception. John Hardy will likely not reopen, right? And then we heard the same thing from 10,000 Things, that they may just concentrate on their e-com business because their retail is dead. To me, I heard this is a real problem.
Right, but I guess but they weren't. The good news is that, like, you know, they all were not going bust. Obviously, this pandemic is global. Mm-hmm. And they're, you know, that Jonathan Adler is, you know, the online sales are up 30%, and David's online stuff was doing good. So, I mean, maybe I was expecting we would be dead. So I was encouraged that they're still muddling through.
If we can bring the landlords close to the same page as what their tenants need, so that they can stay, I think that's one of the things that they've asked us to broker.
Right.
And just for everybody else, if you weren't on the call, I mean, the big issue is a lot of these conversations just haven't happened with the landlords, you know, so people just don't know where things stand in many cases. It's like, oh, we'll talk about it later, or, oh no, you owe everything, or we'll see. So there's a lot of open-ended things. Coral, did you have a question? No? Okay. Chenault?
We need to keep in mind what Brad said, outlining that from tenant to landlord does not solve the problem.
Right.
Because landlords have to pay the mortgage and the tax. And are they going to be forgiven as well? And then how does the city function? And how does the mortgage place stay in business? So it's the cascading effect of.
Right. I think that the issue is that the hard conversations haven't happened because nobody's really been forced to reopen. So nobody knows what's going on.
I'm about to with the tenant downstairs, so I can give you a benchmark of how it went.
So, Carter, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I hadn't unmuted. I just wanted to say, you know, like a local doctor that I see on Broadway in Prince told me that although publicly the landlords had said that they were working with tenants, when she tried to renegotiate, they said that they would defer, but she would owe the full amount in 6 months. And, you know, business off 80% because no one was coming in or more, that's a really difficult gap to when you're trying to also pay all your staff to deal with. So that's kind of like the discussions I'm hearing locally. Separately, shockingly to me, like Chloe had their boards down today and was restocking inventory that's totally visible. And LVMH, that not only went from plywood to aluminum siding to protect themselves, has brought it all down too. So, I mean, it is very quickly coming down. And I would definitely not say that Soho feels at all unsafe during the day. I mean, there's sort of an issue at night because there isn't as much activity and so the stores are in this in-between period of now restocking and having the boards down. So there is a need for additional support from NYPD, but it's not because it doesn't feel like it did.
We're just doing more of a report from the meetings and what we're doing. So but you should definitely come to the next meeting to hear the discussion.
No, I just was addressing what Janet said about Soho because it's definitely changing.
It's just reporting on what was said by the retailer. So
Good news. Good
okay, so, all right, and so moving on, and then for Robin, did you have anything that you wanted to bring up?
Two quick things not related to arts institutions. I spoke with Tom today. It sounds like he's still having technical challenges getting into meetings. Where are we at with getting him? Tom Connor, with getting him.
Yeah, we're on top of that. He's getting a tablet, which is
okay. As of this morning, he seemed like he didn't know what was happening. Just FYI. And I also spoke to Doris, and she says that the faxes she get are erratic. She feels like she doesn't always get what she needs ahead of meetings, and that goes for committee and full board. So I don't know how that can be fixed, but that's her report as of this morning.
Bob?
Can everyone mute their mic if they're not talking? There's some.
All right, I just muted everybody. Bob? Gormley, do you want to just address the Doris question?
Well, I speak to Doris fairly regularly. I think I didn't send her something before the last full board meeting, no, the last landmarks meeting, but she got it from someone else. I just asked her to reach out to me because I send the calendar to her regularly and the updates. I don't think she looks at the calendar all the time
No, it's the actual thing she has to reference, whatever those might be related to committee work or full board work. And it sounds like you fax her and then it doesn't always go through. And then there's a disconnect about her not getting them and you not realizing she's not getting them, but she's not getting them some of the time.
Yeah,
so
that surprised me a lot. That could be. I mean, but all the reports
she told me this morning, so I'm just reporting what she told me.
No, that's fine. Yeah. Anyway, I'll talk to her tomorrow, but I didn't know that was a problem.
Yep. So that's my Tom and Doris update as of this morning.
Okay.
Frederica? Frederica?
I think I said where we stood on land use.
Okay, so all right, so nothing, all right, perfect. Joe, did you want to?
Sure. I'll circulate the resolution soon. We just had two applications. One was for a stoop that was heard by Landmarks just a couple of months ago on East 9th Street, and the community board, our resolution then was that they should make the encroachment into the sidewalk shorter, and they didn't correct that for our meeting. So we're basically just repeating the resolution from Landmarks from April in our denial. And then the other one is for that old raised platform where Spice Market was on 9th Avenue and 13th Street. You know, it's kind of like an eyesore. They're trying to make it nicer. So we had that resolution that was, we recommended approval and the other recommended denial. I'm not sure if any of the applicant or anyone will come to the full board meeting.
Great, thanks. Janine? Schools and education?
We basically under really the leadership of Mar and Patricia and Akila, who she wasn't on this call. We have a meeting tomorrow about how to talk to your kids about racism. And we have 3 amazing speakers. We have our own Akila Azqui, who's a clinical psychologist. We have the principal at Lower Manhattan Community School and Middle School, actually not in our district, but downtown, and lots of kids in our district go there. And that school is really doing amazing work, both in terms of restorative justice and disciplinary records and seeing how they changed over time. And what they've dealt with in the last 2 weeks. And we have the Manhattan Superintendent, Marisol Rosales, also joining us. And I should also just add, leading into transportation, I was looking at the questions that we received in advance of the meeting. We've already had 111 people register, so my guess is we'll have maybe 80 unless more people register. The local schools need help with technology. They need money. Everything comes down to money. And then the second thing they need is they want to expand play streets. So Bob, I saw that you had reached out to SAPO and everything was sort of on hold because of the pandemic. But if the schools are realistically reopening, even on a blended basis, I think that's a new word that the DOE is using instead of hybrid, kids are going to need more space than our sardine-packed buildings for exercise. So really the question that gets to transportation is how do we push that as a reopening? How do we push the city to even consider play streets? Apparently that's on pause as well.
I think that's
You're asking me?
Yes, or Bob or Janet.
I'm still waiting for a response from DOT on the play streets.
Can you apply as an open street? Just use that program instead? And this school is takes responsibility. I mean, I might try that angle.
Okay. I just think we need to have a real plan for that. I'll reach out to the schools and coordinate with everyone offline.
I think again, once we see phase 2 moving in, I think there's the pressures that are on everybody with the outdoor dining is really, I think, wrapped up a lot of these agencies. And once that starts moving and there's clarity, I think that some of these other questions are ones that are going to start to be tackled, because I don't think anybody knows what anything is going to look like. So these are the agencies are the same ones that are involved all around, and there are only so many senior people to go around to really address these. But I have a feeling once people get comfortable with the idea of open streets, and that we may not be inundated with people coming back all at once, I think there'll be a much higher comfort level in using open space more effectively.
Well, here's my question. Should we put that on an agenda for schools in July or in transportation for July?
That's for the play streets, you mean? Is that?
Yeah, or open streets for schools, whatever we want to call it. But
I think that's a good question, right? That maybe it should be in the schools, because this is universally all schools in the city really need this. That's a really, the mayor and the DOE need to be on top of that, right? For the schools, and not have it wrapping into other programs, because it should be that every school should have that option if it works to close the streets around them, right? I mean, we don't want to dilute it.
Would this be good for a joint meeting? Because it's very specific, it's streets.
Yeah, I mean, I know Janine's already got a meeting. That's why I was.
Oh, okay.
And I know you guys are going to be just continuing the discussion on open streets and transportation, most likely. That's
not next month.
No. Okay.
But I would suggest also, Rich, what do you think about open space with your committee?
Yeah.
Because it goes beyond just streets, I think. Whatever other alternatives there might be.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, there's not going to be, just to throw out, just to give you guys an idea, I'm going to give one school as an example, but the DOE says each child needs 65 square feet for space. So a school that holds 850 students currently can hold 350 students at that sort of student per square foot ratio. So, you know, you're going to have less than half the kids going to school, but they're still not going to fit in these tiny gyms and playgrounds. And they're going to need to do something.
It might be good to just start with examples that that do it already. There's some schools that close the street in front.
In CB2, there's PS3, which has the side street.
The side street, yep.
Which isn't, and I guess they couldn't do Hudson, but they will need more.
They do side, yeah.
And there's why did I always St. Anthony's,
St. Joseph's closes.
St. Joseph's on McDougal. The special needs school is on McDougal. I'm sorry, and then I think that's it. Just those three schools.
There's some precedent, and then up in 4 there's the old Clinton, I guess, lab maybe. Yeah, there's precedent, is what we're saying.
There's tons of precedent.
Janine, this is
Yes.
Katie. Can you hear me?
Yep.
They used to close Leroy Street 40 years ago for Our Lady of Pompeii, the little block between Bedford and Bleecker. So that might get back on a list.
Okay.
Do you want to have as an agenda topic, Janine, just discussing this and passing a resolution and saying that the DOE should really be focused on looking at this, and just then we have it. You know, obviously, I don't think we're going to get anybody right this second to come talk about this.
Absolutely not.
And
But
voting on
meanwhile, I'll
everything.
reach out to all the schools.
I'd also like to suggest something. I definitely think, as I'm thinking of it, that it does belong in schools. And I think that the committee should start thinking of places where these open streets might fit and what the provisions for those kind of areas might be. Maybe it's more than just a place. Maybe it's around the corner. I don't know. I mean, this is what you know more about the schools in our district.
It's got to be close. Okay, well.
Maybe we reach out to each school and ask them what they'd like us to advocate for.
So we'll reach out to each school and see what they're thinking and work on something broad and start pushing from there.
Okay. Susanna, I know you're with us for just a few more minutes. I should have called on you early. I apologize.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm going to pop in and out. My meeting at the end of this month is what I said last week, which is Greenwich House is going to talk about the outreach program that it finally set up. It doesn't have that much utility anymore for COVID, but it will have utility going forward, so we can learn about that. And oh my God, I just drew a blank. Oh, and the organization that is opening up a women's homeless shelter on West 11th Street will be presenting.
Okay. Great. And then
and in July, we're going to have a meeting to rethink senior centers and hope that we might have some impact on DFTA and how they write their RFP.
Okay, great. And then for Shirley, for traffic. I think you're muted, Shirley.
The discussion on open streets did continue in June, and there were endless questions. Some answers really in keeping with the discussion tonight. My feeling is that DOT really doesn't have the answers to a lot yet. And I think that they're going to have to figure it out as they go along. And Carter talked about there being a limited amount of senior people or even just staff in general to be able to address all of this. We had some of the bids were there to talk about their experience with their open streets, and there are just some very simple concerns that we addressed in a resolution. I mean, things like that can be really easily improved, I think. One is the need for more visible and larger signage, as an example. And also a concern about drivers not putting back the barriers and what the alternative kinds of barriers can be and on. So you'll see that in the resolution. Next month, we're having MTA New York City Transit come to tell us about whatever their plans are for buses and the subway. And lastly, I guess you all received the draft letter about the 14th Street busway that Mayor de Blasio declared permanent without any kind of consultation whatsoever with anyone. And I don't know if any of you have any corrections, edits. I will tell you that since I looked at it again and Frederica got to me, I did make some edits in the first line where I said that we were stunned, which sounded kind of overdramatic. I think I'm going to substitute disturbed. We were disturbed. And the second paragraph, Frederica made it pretty obvious we don't need all that excessive reference to all the improvements that have been achieved so far. So I would suggest I take all that out and just simply start with we recognize that achievements have been, improvements have been achieved, but that it's nowhere yet near ready to be a success by every measure. So that's what I have anyhow. And if anybody else has any other suggestions.
Does anybody have any?
Silencio, eh?
Janet?
Yeah, Janet had one. Right.
I just, you know, we obviously just got the letter before the meeting, so I haven't processed this completely, but a little bit more deference to I know it is in there, but recognizing, appreciating that obviously the study couldn't be complete, and you know, we don't want the transit world is talking about Carmageddon, like and people aren't going to want to get in the subway, so they really are trying to beef up the bus network. I mean, when they announced this is permanent, they also announced a busway on Fifth Avenue from 59th to 34th Street. So I just like something to reread it and include something positive that we, you know, recognizing this need, and we admire them for being forward thinking, you know, at the same time, we would hope that they would continue to study and come back to us or whatever.
Okay, Janet had mentioned this to me already, and I had said I didn't want to accept that because that's not really what the letter is about. The letter is about the failure to observe the process, first of all, coming to the community, secondly, of suddenly deciding something is a success when it really hasn't been tested. And I certainly, and I think we all recognize, if we've been watching the media and so on, that we do need much more mileage in terms of buses, bus routes, which MTA has been asking for. They've been asking for 60 miles. And we have been told that de Blasio one will give us 20 miles, and among that 20 miles is what's already existing, which is the 14th Street busway, which will continue to run anyhow as a pilot. We're not telling them to do it for 18 months once everything is back. We're just simply telling them that the conclusions haven't been reached. Even Sam Schwartz, who's been doing the monitoring, has not reached a conclusion. And in the letter, as I refer to it, has said, what has he said? He said that New York City DOT and MTA continue to address issues as they arise to ensure the success of the pilot project. So there really had not been an intention to suddenly do this. And I think the sentiment in general, and by the way, I'm not against the busway, but I think we do have to demand that the process that was originally supposed to be followed be followed.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Cheryl. I mean, we wouldn't want to provide them the opportunity of doing this if the decision were the opposite. So the process is very important, you know, that if they suddenly took away things from us. So we really want to be able to comment on things and not have permanent decision made for what's a temporary time period, right? Even though that temporary may be a year or longer. But we just don't want them to circumvent us completely, right? I mean, that's important. You know, that could happen on some of our other roads, that they just give them all to cars completely without discussing anything to us too in response to something. You know, that there's not a lot of confidence in the decision making, I think, in certain parts of this as we go forward. So I think that those suggestions that Frederica made are pretty good. Does anybody have any objection if we send out this letter? I don't see any objection. Okay, great. Okay, and so we have traffic and sorry, I dropped my papers before, so everything's out of order. Landmarks, Chanel. I was going alphabetically, but that did not.
I'm happy to speak. Could I first say a bit about the restaurants and so forth? I noticed an inordinate amount of use of stoops, and not in a very kind way to the stoops. So in that we're involved in preservation of just private property in general, and rubbish, which I saw in an area way, which was clearly rubbish from the gatherers from a nearby restaurant. We have only two. I keep waiting. What was said earlier about the stoop and its involvement with the sidewalk on another 9th Street, East 9th Street. We had a request in Soho for a restaurant to open up, as many do, with full-length French type doors to be opened, which invariably leads to, oh, isn't that a nice sidewalk? We'd like to go there as well. And Carter was at our meeting and recalled the occasion of their liquor license. And we went back to the resolution, and it was clear that in the stipulations, they said they were not contemplating, nor would they ask for French doors that opened. It points out the importance of coordinating among the committees. And I think what we might do in the future for this is always, before our resolution is finalized, check back and see if there are any restrictive clauses that would mean that if we approved it, we would be contradicting something already not only brought up and discussed, but agreed to.
And Chanel, just as far as you had sent me the language, I had sent it on to Donna and to Bob. I know they were writing their own resolutions, but to see if they had thoughts on sort of that language.
Okay, I did find the date that I was there. So
okay, and then
if anybody would get that.
You know, we never discussed during that meeting the fact that there's a historical storefront in that existing building, which is the bakery. You know, that's already there, which.
Oh, I didn't realize that was the same building.
Yeah, it's the same building. And I think, you know, we might want to just, you know, there's an example of the historic, I don't know, it's just I'd sent you that picture, just a point.
Okay, I'll add something about that. That's important.
You know, that's actually in the building. And so you don't have to go far. And they specifically excluded it, you know, from their presentation, which was a little bit disingenuous, I thought, because
it was shown as a separate example of a big window.
Yeah.
Not in connection with their application, but from the neighborhood montage. There is another question I want to ask, and it's a policy, I guess, that goes across all the committees. I did not, it seemed a little whiny somehow to put in that we don't want to contradict other committees in what we do. It's perfectly obvious. And one reason, because I think Landmarks more than some because of the directness to the commission, we are looking at landmarks issues. We're not looking at noise issues, though we think about it, and many others. And we're so strict about not letting people talk about it and not letting it creep into the resolutions that it seemed better just to state what was the fact, and that an inference be drawn.
Okay. Thank you, Chanel. Okay, moving on to liquor licensing. Bob and Donna, do you guys?
You want to go first, Donna? Okay, I'll go. So we had a pretty busy month in general. We had a few applications. We've been kind of spreading out our meetings to try to help people. At least that was the theory behind it, to have more meetings. In any event, we had 3 meetings in the last month and a number of applications in the meatpacking. And a couple of those were, the recommendations were to deny, and some were to deny unless. We had really the one denial where people may end up coming to the full board. The applicant and the Bagatelle. So Bagatelle has a restaurant with, you know, entertainment level music during the day on Saturdays and Sundays, and can be a bit problematic, at least in terms of where it's been for a long time and the way it operates. And it wants to move next door within the Gansevoort Hotel to another location, which has had a lot of problems. It was a nightclub. So it was like a double combination type of thing. And so the committee was recommended to deny that particular application. It was kind of a bad fit, but we got a letter or two from them. They're upset. They want to try to renegotiate at this point. So there may be people at the full board on that particular item. All of the committee decisions were unanimous. But we had a number of applications, big ones in meatpacking. We had the Hyundai. Basically, it's a car showroom, branding type. They've taken up a whole building and they want a liquor license. Then there's also Restoration Hardware, which came back and now wants to have a rooftop restaurant, when initially they told us they were going to be a showroom also, which is, so we get a lot of that hybrid stuff in the meatpacking. So we had a number of applications. We also had an application in Soho where we also recommended to deny. It was an on-premise where there had never been one there before, and one of the applicants or one of the operators had significant problems at another location and hadn't really resolved those problems. So anyway, those it's called Felix Soho. Was an application where, so there were 3 recommendations for deny. There were a number of upgrades and on-premise licenses where we approved it, at least in terms of deny and less as well. And then there's Brad's bill. So Brad Holman has a bill to allow people, well, he wants to help businesses, which is the good thing. And he wants to allow them, or allow what's currently allowed, which because of COVID, you can have basically takeout from bars and restaurants. And that, as you all know, has created a lot of problems. But at the same time, you know, it's understandable. And so Brad's idea, Mr. Holman's idea, was to extend that for a couple of years to the businesses. Probably a little premature, at least in terms of, you know, the idea was good, but maybe we wait and see how things kind of turned out. But in any event, the committee was, I think, pretty smart, and the takeout portion was really rife with problems. Kind of like you could just walk away with a drink in hand. It's probably not a good idea, but the idea of delivery with alcohol did not necessarily, people were not opposed to that. The problem was that we did not get not a single person who appeared at our meeting, and not a single email did we get, and we got lots of them. We're for the bill. So we I think did a pretty smart thing in saying, not necessarily that everyone's against the bill, it's a terrible idea, but rather it's the concept is a good one. But we would say you should do it in these, with these limitations. And the limitations were really, that when you deliver, like the idea of delivery of a meal, a dinner to somebody at their home was not a bad idea. And then to allow drinks to go with that. And then the restrictions, some of the ideas that were thrown out there were, well, maybe it should just be 50%, right? 50% of the bill should be alcohol and 50% food. That way we know that it's, and then obviously people have to be ID'd at the house when the drink and the food gets there. So anyway, the concept was right, but in practice it wasn't gonna. It had too many pitfalls. The takeout portion, the idea being that you could just take out drinks, instead of there being last call, you can actually take it with you, and that some places where at least in our neighborhoods close at 4 o'clock, that probably would cause problems. And so, in any event, we got a lot of help from folks on the committee, and the resolution's not quite out. I gave you kind of a rundown, but I'll try to get that done tonight. We'll some last edits and get it to the committee, but probably get that resolution tomorrow to everybody.
Great, thanks, Bob. That was very diplomatic discussion of the takeout bill. There's clearly some strong feelings. Donna, did you want to add anything?
I don't really have much to add. I wouldn't be, the restoration hardware application is just a restaurant wine. I would not be surprised if we see them up at the SLA also. We'll see what happens with that. They're serving it in their upstairs restaurant, and what they've always wanted was kind of, and debated, is the service on the exterior, what is supposed to be an outdoor furniture showroom, which they're asking to have that be a restaurant. So I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up at the SLA also. So.
Great, thanks. Rich, Parks.
Yeah, so we had 3 fun-filled topics, 2 of which resulted in resolutions. I was just looking back through the notes. I forgot about 100 people logged on at various times. And the topic I think they were most interested in was the proposed updated design for the renovation of Mercer Playground. The Parks Department had come to us with NYU because NYU is funding the budget as it is for this renovation. They had come presented in February, and everybody there had come up with some concerns or things they didn't like. So they came back, and I think generally everyone felt that the updated design delivered on that feedback, and we were very appreciative for that. The one area of concern was not so much with the design, but the local residents expressed some concerns about how the park will be operated. And really what they were worried about was whether skateboarders will take it over and do tricks and scraping around. And so in the end, we said we understood that there were operational concerns, but that we liked the design and appreciated that they had heard our feedback. I could expect a few people might come and explain from the local residents that they're against it, but they're really saying that they want some safeguards against skateboarders taking over. So that was the big one. The third topic, the one that didn't get the resolution, was just an update that we get periodically from the Washington Square Park Conservancy. And the big news there, for those who haven't heard, is that George Vilanikis has left his role. He had a dual role, which was both the Washington Square Park administrator and the Washington Square Park Conservancy executive director. The idea of the dual role was there to ensure that the activities of the Conservancy are always aligned with the park's interests. I'm not sure that's going to be the case when they find the replacement. They may not find somebody who does both. So that was about it. I don't think there'll be anything contentious. Both resolutions passed. It was a long meeting. I did not run it efficiently. It was really long. Carter, you would have been proud. It was long. It passed yours. Yeah, I think it was 3 hours long.
No, it's.
You would not have been proud. You would have mocked me.
Right, thanks, Rich.
Yeah.
So I think it was all the standing committees. Now we're going to go to the reopening working group. And generally, just somebody had asked me, a couple of people have asked me questions. Generally, working groups are smaller compositions of people just addressing particular topics. And so just that was something that somebody had asked me just to point out to people. And so that's generally the composition is generally smaller. So going to the reopening working group, Valerie?
Thank you. As most of you have seen from when we passed the 22-page letter package with several addenda, it'll be in the full board packet this week. We are also going to launch something called Restarting Together, which is a limited series of informational webinars that we'll host probably just during the day. We're not expecting resolutions to come out of those, but it'll be Restarting Together will be a series for the residents and businesses of CB2 as we move into the reopening phase 2 and phase 3. So knowing that we're expecting to hear movement this week on the temporary outdoor dining legislation, we will be doing a follow-up to that as one of these webinars. So we will be ready to also potentially comment on it. And then the second one that we will be, and these will get on the calendar within the next week or so. And the second one will be, we want to hear about the reopening plans for NYU and the new school, since those touch on several of our committees, especially with the student population coming back and being consumers for our local businesses, as well as other entities that they touch across all of the committees. So stay tuned for that. Thank you.
Great. So that's leads us into sort of all our committee reports, I think. And now we're going to go into new business, which I had said at the beginning of this, and the meeting is running for quite a while now. But for the equity working group, so Patricia and Mar and I got on the phone right after our last meeting to sort of figure out and map out a way to move forward with addressing the issues that have all really become a part of our daily lives now. And, you know, particularly after the death of George Floyd really came to the forefront in our community. And, you know, one of the issues there were systemic issues that we see throughout all of our systems. We're all part of an institution, and we have our own policies and procedures that we can improve so that the issues that are all being raised become part of our discussions. And so that's one of the things that I really pointed out with Mar and Patricia that we need to look at. And a lot of this is fairly straightforward. It is not complicated. There are things that we can do much better. We just haven't gone and looked at ourselves of late. And that's something that you know, I'm hoping that we can do quickly. And then there's other work that's going to take a little bit longer to do. And that's something that we are going to explore. One of the things that we had talked about was a letter or a statement. We had discussed it, and I had asked them to reach out to people with the letter that they've composed. They've shared it with the executive committee. I'm hoping that we can put this forward as new business on the full board meeting and ask members if they'd like to sign on to this letter. This is a letter from community board to our local community. There's still a lot of open areas and where the working group can go. As I mentioned at the beginning, the board chairs of all the other boards are considering maybe putting together a separate group with where each of the boards is represented for a larger issue. So there's a lot of moving parts. You know, what we really want to do, I think, here is to influence and to address the areas which are part of our community. We had discussed, you know, the local residents, people who live in our community, people who work in our community, people who visit our community, as far as providing ideas to our elected officials. Those are some of the areas, but there's a lot of open area for discussion going forward. And I guess, Mara, Patricia, do you guys want to say a few things? And then we can discuss the letter.
Hi, everyone. We wrote the statement to address what's happening currently in our nation and in our world, because it's a life or death situation for Black and Brown people. And we hope that everyone on the community board will sign their name or affix their name to the statement. I hope you had an opportunity to read it. If you have questions, comments, would love to hear it because this meeting is being recorded so that we can take it back to the working group to address some of these concerns. Mar?
I think you pretty much said it all. We would love your support. It's an honor to be able to do this important and good work. And we'd love to know what you feel about the letter.
Okay, I see. Michael, you've raised your hand.
Yes, one quick question. I'm still not clear about the letter. I don't think any member of our board would object to signing on to it. I know I'm not on the executive committee, but as a board member, I would sign on to it. I'm not clear who the audience would be. Carter, I think you said our community. Can we ask the working group or you to clarify a bit more? Who is the community that will be the target of this letter so we know when those of us would agree to sign on to it, to whom, is that good English, to whom the letter is going?
Or I think I'll let Maura and Patricia address this too, but I think it's to our community. You know, community board two's community, and you can interpret that as wide or narrow as you choose to, but the manner of distribution in this day and age would be to our email list. And I think that this letter will live on our website as well. We're going to set up a section for the equity working group on the website, and that's the target audience,
as well as elected officials and the local press, I'm assuming.
Well, I think it's this is really following on what Mar had said last week, which is we're reaching out to people to begin a dialogue. And that's what the intent of the letter is. Patricia, Mar, do you guys want to?
Yeah, I mean, it is. We're reaching out. We're extending a hand. We are telling our community that we are ready to have these conversations and take a good look at, as Carter said, where we can do better. And yes, the things that are happening in our world today don't just affect one group of people. They affect all of us. And so we speak to all of us, our entire community, ourselves, and whatever that means. It's for everybody, right? Because we all have to make this commitment. It's really more of a statement of solidarity to
Coral?
Yeah.
Sorry. So I didn't get the letter because I'm not an executive, but something occurred to me today in doing our parent-teacher conferences all day. And I don't know whether you reference at all sort of the education and what we teach the next generation, because I was actually kind of shocked at some of the curriculum that was in the slavery and civil rights, which happened to be what my son was studying this spring. And so I raised that, and apparently every parent in the school did raise it. And it's something that I think really should be reviewed. What is actually being taught in the textbooks in our schools?
Well, that's a perfect example of, one of the things we would look at through our schools and ed committee. And it's something we do look at actually in schools and ed already and a priority for us. And I would love to share with you information on CRSC, which is Culturally Responsive Sustaining Education, offline, and I'll tell you how that can happen, hopefully.
Yeah.
Plus, we also in Schools and Ed tomorrow night will be having that talk about how to talk to your kids about racism. So please tune in, Coral. We'd love to have you join in and hear.
I certainly will try to. I mean, actually what our teachers are teaching our kids, because I was actually kind of shocked by what the curriculum was.
Right. So
So, I mean, even beyond the parents, the actual, what is DOE approved curriculum on civil rights and slavery today?
Well, yes.
Yeah. I think in our area, that's something we can directly address as families and as a community.
Exactly.
Thank
you. And I just sent to a few of you, I just kind of quickly, I'm sure I missed somebody, but I tried to just, anybody who may not have seen this, I just send out an email with just to forward a copy to people who aren't on the executive committee so you can see what we're discussing. There are other comments? Susanna?
Sorry, I just want to turn on my video so that I can tell you with my face how grateful I am that you guys wrote this letter. I think it's beautiful. And I think that it is just very dignified. I wanted to ask a question. There is one sentence that makes me uncomfortable. I'm sure you won't like that it makes me uncomfortable, but I don't know how Little Africa left Greenwich Village, and I don't know that they were erased in the same way that perhaps the Lenape were. I was wondering if you would be open to a more affirmative sentence there about how we so value, you know, because Greenwich Village has been a place where, you know, groups of poor European immigrants came, and communists and libertines and poets and homosexuals when they were still called homosexuals. If you would feel comfortable with a more positive sentence about how we just want to affirm our gratitude for the contribution that's been made by all of those who came before us and those who continue to come to us every day. And the reason I say that, and you don't have to answer me here, but the reason I say that is because you know, our neighborhood has gone through an enormous demographic shift. I mean, you know, this is a big city and it's been around for a long time. So every neighborhood has had many, many lives to it. So I think that we are viewed from many outside of our neighborhood as, you know, the most affluent, one of the most affluent neighborhoods in the city. You know, the highest real estate values in the city. And so I think I would love to be able to communicate to the rest of the city and anyone who wants to read this, that that's not who we are, that we affirm that our identity has been made by scores of different kinds of people who have come into our neighborhood, and that we value that. That it's very important to us.
Thank you. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. To answer how Little Africa began or was, you know, erased, a affluent white woman came downtown and said, we need more playgrounds. And so the majority of the housing over by Minetta was toppled. That's where the majority of the Black people lived. And so it was erased, yes. So there's that. And, but yeah, let's look into it and let's look at the language a little harder. I don't mind doing that. And, but I would like to be specific. I felt like it was important that we did mention them and honor the Lenape and the inhabitants of Little Africa in our letter, because they are a part of our history. I mean, the Lenape, we are on their land. So, you know, I thought it was important to address that, and to address that, you know, in celebrating all the things in the letter, in that line, we celebrate, you know, all of the great things that make our neighborhoods great. But this is also part of the history, and it factors into who we are. So we can't say that's not who we are, because that is who we are. So I wanted to honor the truth of that history.
Yeah, and just to another point, our physical history doesn't honor that in our community. And I think that that's something that I've discussed with a few people, that it's not physically present. We don't have the same monuments. We don't have the physical reminders of the institutional history that we have for many of the other groups that you described, Susanna. And I think that that was something that was very striking to me when I discussed this with Mar and Patricia. And it's something that we also want to look at as part of our processes in our local community. You know, it's very important I think that's a part of looking at ourselves and looking at our own community in, you know, in the broad way that we need to. The equity working group, right? That's a very important part of that discussion. Sandy, you were waving, I saw.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what's been said. Ironically, Blacks then moved into what is now Central Park, and they had a vibrant community there. And someone said, we need a park. And they were displaced once again from Central Park, which is now Central Park. So that history has been repeated within our city several times. That's it.
Thank you, Sandy. Yeah, yeah. You're muted, Carter.
Carter, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry, Keen? I was just telling Keen to unmute herself and I had to unmute myself.
Right. I am so happy we are getting this committee. I think, you know, it's a very good idea. And it's about time. There's a lot of work to do. They're going to be a very busy committee, and it's going to be very exciting. So I'm thrilled you were doing this. That's it.
Great. Thanks, Keen. Robin?
Yeah, I echo everything everybody says. I think this is a great letter. I wanted to just add one little, I'm sure you're going to push back on this, and I completely understand, because I understand the spirit of this. But you used the word murders for a number of people, and I know the spirit. I understand the spirit behind that. But like, for example, if I recall, Sandra Bland, I know it was a suicide at the end of the day. I realized that's technically, I think that's on the book. So I was wondering what your thinking was in using that one word to cover all the people you mentioned and the people that you infer are also included in that group. That's, you know, it's a powerful word to attribute to everybody, which may not technically apply. And I know I'm sounding sort of very technical, but since this is going into a statement, I just wanted to hear your thoughts about what your thinking was behind using the word murder for everybody.
No, sure.
I mean, I don't want to nitpick. Sandra Bland would not be dead if, you know, she was, you know, she wouldn't be dead. And all of these people, in my personal opinion, are victims of genocide, which is murder. So, I mean, are we talking legally? Should we not say that? Is that your concern?
It popped out at me because when I looked at everybody, I do anecdotally, quickly, I was wondering if it actually really, I mean, there are nuances to each of them on the books in technical, the emotion and spirit, and I understand exactly why you put it. I totally get it. But I'm wondering if there might be a more powerful way to, and that reflects because there is a little bit of nuance to each of them. It can be fine the way it is because I do understand the intent of it, but I'm wondering if using one word to apply to everybody it may not actually be as strong as finding a more nuanced, maybe genocide's a better word because it is, I feel like that's actually somehow that feels more powerful to me because that's more of it's just a different kind of words. Anyway, it was just something it just popped out at me when I read it. Because again, technically on the books, it's a little more nuanced than that, but I understand where you guys are coming from completely.
I'd love to jump in when.
Yeah, no, I'm done. I'm done.
Hi. I just want to jump in. This is Sandy. You know, when they talk about Jews under Nazi rule and in Germany, they say so-and-so died at this concentration camp or that concentration camp, and there was a lot of disease, dysentery, a lot of stuff, but they didn't die, they were murdered. You know, it's a much more accurate word. These people were murdered by starvation, by deprivation, by actual being gassed. The proper word is murder. The way Sandra Bland was treated in that prison cell and the way the police tortured her and then ignored her, she was murdered. She was murdered because she got caught in that situation and the cops murdered her. And that's what goes on in all the, even, you know, this latest one with this poor guy who was sleeping at a Wendy's. I mean, they tortured him for, if you watch the video, he was given a sobriety test that lasted about 20 minutes. And it was all about vicious control. Can he do it? And the cop who was conducting the test, you know, just was vicious in his silence and finally escalated the situation to a point where they could kill him. So those are all murders. And I think it's important that we start using stronger language to describe what goes on around us. You know, I rest my case.
Thank you, Sandy. Valerie.
Thank you. First of all, I completely support the letter overall, and I support the work of this committee and the chairs. I wasn't intending on commenting on the murders word or use of the word because it didn't stand out to me, but I will offer as a suggestion potentially using the word homicide. I'm not for one or the other, but I'm just throwing that out there as an alternative. I obviously support the letter as it is. And then my only other suggestion would be, I think it's the second to last line. And I know, and thank you for sharing it and allowing me to comment earlier on it, but there is a line, sorry, let me just look really quickly. It's the last line of the second paragraph. I think we do a disservice by putting these three words together with a slash, because I think you can emphasize them more. It's buried / forgotten / ignored. And I would.
I'm sorry, we forgot. We couldn't choose which one.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think use all three and offset them with commas, so it's a much stronger statement than just slash. That's all. It gets lost. But I think altogether, separated by commas, it's very granular. I apologize, but otherwise, I fully support the work and thank you.
Thank you so much for that suggestion, Valerie. That's awesome.
Chenault.
The letter is beautiful. To the point of some recognition in the community, we have such a rich and continuous history here, from historic times through the involvement in all the gay liberation, for example, and the music scene here. Has been so enriched. There is much, much to be commemorated.
Thank you, Chenault. Amy.
Thank you.
I just want to go on the record that I agree that murder is the appropriate term, just how Patricia said this isn't about life and death. I think it's important that we start using words like that because it can be, it can gloss over, I think, without anyone meaning for that to be, about how horrific this is. I know we all know that. I think it's important that we use very strong words, and I would support the word murder and talking about that this is a life and death situation.
Thanks, Amy. Susan.
Sorry, here I am. I just want to say I fully support the committee. I'm incredibly excited about it. I would do anything possible. If you wanted help with anything you're doing, I'm completely on your side. And Sandy came up first, but I think that using the word murder is 100% appropriate. And I'm very happy that the community board is now taking a really strong stand. And I don't want us to do anything to diminish that in any way. This is a milestone for us, and I'm glad everyone is embracing it, or hope everyone embraces it.
Thanks, Susan. Janine.
Janine, you're muted.
Still can't hear you. Janine, and you're unmuted on our side, so maybe if your phone, it's some crossover of muting something, or I think you said wait a second, but we still can't hear you, so.
She wrote,
Lisa,
I fully
Lisa,
support
yeah.
this letter as written.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. She wrote. Okay, there we go. All right. Thank you, Janine. Donna.
I was just going to say the same thing. I fully support the letter. You guys did a great job on it. I have one comment, which is the name of the working group, the equity working group. I'm just curious if you would like to consider changing that to racial equity working group. Because that from the letter, it seems like that's what you're speaking to. And I think that might better define the work that it sounds to me like the group is going to be doing. And also put the commas in as Valerie suggested. That was bothering me and didn't emphasize those a lot. So that's it.
Thank you, Donna. Michael.
Yes, Carter, thank you for sending the letter. As the discussion was going on, I read it, which I had not seen before. I think it's an excellent letter, and I am prepared to sign it as soon as you say we are ready. Will we be agreeing to sign on to it at the board meeting Thursday, or will you be asking us to do that in advance of the meeting Thursday? How are you planning to handle that?
I think I'll just, I had said this at the beginning, but I think that we bring this up as new business, and it's not really a vote. It's whether you're affirming to put your name on it or not, right? So we'll put this forward as under new business and have people affirming whether they'd like to, as Patricia put, affix their name. I don't, in this day and age, we can't have everybody actually sign it, which is something I had wanted to do, but they had pointed out in this day and age that's not possible. So it would be listing people's names underneath the bottom of the letter. In taking Matt's point at the last week's executive about how a board passes things, we generally do it through resolutions. I thought it would be appropriate and more powerful to have people actually have each of our names on there as a letter to our community, as opposed to coming from the community board per se. Coral. You're breaking up a little bit. We're catching one little snippet each time.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I think it's impossible to separate race and economics. It's just impossible. So I appreciate equity discussions, but it's actually quite important to not have economic discussion and without their kind, which is and it's impossible to separate the two. So I think is that are more difficult to and why we're really they're linked very, very directly together.
Okay, just to summarize, because we're missing some of the words that you think that it should stay equity working group. Is that correct? Just, yes, okay. We missed a few words in there, so just, okay. Thank you, Coral. Was there anybody else who wanted to weigh in on this? Okay, and so going forward, I will bring this up on Thursday, and I'm really looking forward, and I'm hoping that for everybody as members of the different committees to think about ways that we can have the best conversations that we can have in each of the committees to ensure that all the right conversations are happening at the appropriate time through asking questions. And, for each committee that's a little bit different. Some it's more apparent than others, but it would be nice to enshrine within the process better ways of doing things. And that's something that some of it doesn't require much discussion, and some of it will require more discussion. Okay, and I don't think I missed anything in the chat. Is there anything, Susanna?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it might be a good show if anyone wants to come to the Social Services Committee meeting in June to give support to the homeless shelter that is going to be on West 11th Street. Because I don't know if a lot of people will come. I'm sure that people are worried about it. Can't start my video. Oh, I'm sure that people are worried about it. And if anyone wants to lend their support to it, that would be great.
You know, Susanna, can I just add one thing? I was speaking with Matt Vigiano.
Uh-oh.
Representative. Yeah. I'm sorry.
You just froze for a second. So you're speaking with Matt Vigiano?
Oh, yeah. And, I was misunderstanding the outreach they did. I thought they had kind of almost went door to door. They did speak to the new school down in the corner, but they were only dealing with the block association and relying on the block association to kind of do the outreach. I don't know if between that conversation a day or two ago and your meeting, if they're going to do any more vigorous outreach, but I don't know what you were thinking, but I actually thought they were doing something more extensive than just talking to the block association president.
When we met with them, that was their representation and our advice to them, which was to go door to door. And
I mean, it's possible that no one will show up and no one will say boo about it. But this is going to be, I think it's a controversial issue, and I think we want to support it. So if we have opposition, if anyone wants to lend a word, that would be great.
We're hard pressed to have, I won't, we'll have the committee meeting, but it's, yeah. Sandy? You're muted. Hold on a second. Let me unmute yourself.
Okay. I just wanted to go back to the title of this thing, and I think I understand the point you're making that race touches on everything, economics, health care, all of it. But I think using the word racial equity does include all those categories. We know that from housing to health to jobs to whatever, that there are racial barriers that that limit people and consign them to places that other people don't have to go. So I don't want to dilute the title of the statement by taking the word racial out. I'd like to keep it in because I think that has to be our focus.
Just for a point of clarification, it is not in there now. So you're advocating.
I know. I support adding it.
So I'll discuss with Patricia and Mars as we go forward. It's the name and does anybody? So are we prepared to conclude the new business section? Is that? I don't see anybody. Okay, and so everybody is comfortable with presenting the letter with I think that Patricia and Mara will reflect on the discussion and amend the letter as necessary. And then what I will do is, Bob, if we can distribute that earlier in the afternoon on Thursday, just separately from the board package, just to make sure that all board members have a chance to read this beforehand. Everybody's good with that? Okay. As far as, is there any other new business? Is there any other old business? Okay, we'll adjourn the meeting. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody.
Oh, we're done.
See you Thursday.
Thanks, everyone.
If not tomorrow. Yeah.
Yes, or tomorrow. Sorry, for those that will see tomorrow for Janine's meeting. It'll be a great meeting too. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Carter.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carter.
Bye.
Thanks, Carter.